All right, welcome everybody to the Newell Varsity Week 2. I am Will Brackish Britt Brooks. Joining me is Callum Melvinizel Isles, and we are here to bring you rounds 4 and 5 of this spring competition.
Yeah, it is going to be a good one today. We have got some wonderful games coming up with, let's just say some teams that did pretty mixed results last week, but
Yeah,
storied
definitely.
nonetheless, and I can't wait to get into them.
Absolutely, yeah, as soon as we can. So we've got round 4 and 5. Round 4, we've got Careless, currently sat at 3 and 0. Very impressive performance last week, an incredibly close fought game against our current champions, DMUT1.
Yes, certainly. It was very back and forth. We saw Careless really went on to the back foot in the early game. This week they have side selection and have chosen blue against Robin's Cringers. And frankly, I expect there to be a lot of explosions and all this kind of action happening in the early game, which, as we saw, Careless definitely know how to fight through and come back on the back of a Camille last week.
Yeah, Ernst went absolutely huge on that pick.
By far, they were, I believe, something like 7-0-2 at, I think it was 15, something around that kind of level of solo carrying where they had
So, yeah.
beyond 90% kill participation for a majority of the game, and was solely the reason that Careless was still able to keep going. But eventually the team caught back up, had a nice comp going that helped them play a very guerrilla warfare style of play. And right now it's going to be seeing how they can play into Robin's Cringers, who actually had an almost identical schedule last week as for their games.
Yes, so both of them have played against Portsmouth Paladins, who is actually being featured in round 5, and the Arctic Foxes. They both picked up wins against those teams. However, of course, as we saw on stream, Careless beat DMUT1. Robin's Cringers lost to Lincoln Ascended in round 1.
Yes, only minor differences, and since they had such a similar strength of schedule, it's going to be interesting to now see how these teams can differentiate, because if you look at it, based on just those numbers alone, seems pretty similar. You'd imagine these teams 2-1 and 3-0 to be quite close. However, the one thing to note is the only difference between them is Careless played against the MUT1, who we know is a force to be reckoned with. Anybody who saw that game last week would have thought that they had it in the bag for a majority of it. Whereas Robin's Cringers did drop their game to, like you said, Lincoln Ascended, which was that team's only win of the week. So it's going to be important now to see if Robin's Cringers can get together. That was their first game of the Varsity League that they ended up losing. So coming into this week, hopefully we can see that they've really picked it up again and actually started to get it together for this one.
Yeah, I was going to say, if there's ever a game to really step it up, this is absolutely the one, especially since their round 5 match, which won't be featured, is against the aforementioned DMUT1.
Yeah, so it's really the possibly the toughest week of schedule. DMUT1 actually right now 1 and 2. We'll talk more about them in our second game, as one of the other teams to take a game off them was Portsmouth Paladins, who we will, like you said, be featuring next. But looking forward, this is by far going to be one of the hardest weeks of play you're going to have for the entirety of Varsity. Having them back to back, it's really dependent on what form you come into the day with. If you come in good form, had some practice games, warmed up, everybody's ready to play, then you can take games off the best of them, even if you're in the middle of the pack team. It's all about just getting in the right headspace as a player and coming in. If you've got a good draft plan, something new is because it's Varsity and because you know who you're playing against in advance, you can actually start to formulate plans and maybe look into the pick ban, which I'm excited to get into, as there's definitely some picks, especially in the jungle, that I think we're going to need to put a prime focus on.
Yes, and of course there's some history between some of these players. Some of them have been here for a very long time. Bio Chipmunk, the ADC player for Robin's Cringers, has been present in the newer leagues for a great long while. Treleep as well from Careless has been making the rounds for sure. I'm expecting that we'll see something like a Nidalee ban against him, just of how much he plays that champion.
Yeah, I would be almost certain, especially considering that the opposing jungler for Robin's Cringers does like to pilot the Graves, and that Graves versus Nidalee matchup is a rough one, since they changed the quick draw armor to just armor as opposed to magic resist and armor on the Graves E. It's made it so he does a fair bit worse against magic damage junglers. When Echo was super prominent early last season, it meant that Graves had a much worse time against them, And right now, it's really Magic that can put them down. And oh boy, are there enough champions currently in the meta that can go Magic damage jungle.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the two most prolific ones right now are definitely Nidalee and Lilia. But as you say rightly, there are plenty of other champions that can build that way if they so desire.
And as you may know, people viewing, is there was meant to be a patch today. So we had gone ahead and prepared all the notes, had everything ready to find out, okay, well, this is what's going to be. Looking at the champions, the jungle's meant to get hit quite bad, losing a lot of XP on most of their camps. So, problematically, when that didn't happen, it meant that a lot of the notes I specifically, as a jungler, had gone through and looked at, didn't really show much fruit anymore, because I was more so looking into things like who had played things like the Rek'Sai, like the Jarvan, these kind of early game gankers that I expect to be really good on the next patch, they're going to be a bit less prominent now.
Well, they might not show up today at the very least.
Yeah, not today. Well, tomorrow.
Likely, yeah, next week we may start seeing these more gank-heavy junglers, and of course we are the Jungle Bros. We both this is the lens from which we see the game. So yes, expect to see more of those gank-heavy junglers coming out from next week in Varsity. As you said, the Rek'Sai, the Jarvan. If we're feeling a bit spicy, maybe even the Xin Zhao. I am personally a fan.
Oof. Oh, I'm getting flashbacks back to, what was it, season 8? Well, I was thinking more recent. Different Xin Zhao.
Season 6 and 8 then, yeah. Both of those had good early game gank metas.
As an Ivan player, that's not a good time for me. Definitely some of the roughest League of Legends have had to deal with those constant early invades, the aggression just poured on top of each other. And we're currently just waiting for the teams to get together and get in the champ select if we can, so we'll just need to have a few more minutes before then. But as we are waiting to it, we can start to point out some of the different players who are going to want to watch this game. And I think it's going to be very jungle-centric between the Sweet Summer Day and Trilite. I think those two are going to be the key players, as we saw last week on stream against DMUT1. Careless, they did fall behind early through the bottom side of the map. That was from some very good proactive plays from DMUT1. So it was really the jungler and the top lane that bailed them out. It was the defensive pathing from Lilia that kept Careless in the game, along with just the constant snowballing that the Camille on Urks was just really running through that game. I know Camille's very powerful right now, but when you pilot it like that, it looks like something else.
Yeah, there's always obviously the running meme of a good Camille player versus a great Camille player. I think we can, after that game, obviously small sample size, but that definitely pushes Urks much more towards the great Camille category.
Certainly so, and we have a lot of new veterans coming into this game, so I don't think that it's going to be too much of a shout that if the game does get to that almost Dragon Soul point where macro plays start to be a lot more prevalent and really decide how the game is swung, I think we're going to get a really smart game as we head into it. A lot of scrappiness early where players just try and skill check each other. But when you take a look at more veteran players in a league, you get much more comfortable with falling behind early, with trying to recover. And this really goes to show when you are like a quality team. In these more so chaotic levels of play, you can a lot of the time just see a team get blown up out of the water and rolled very hard if they lose even the first 10 minutes of the game. But with things like the Dragon Soul, with things like the Elder Dragon subsequently, you can punish teams who don't know how to end games out well. And right now, looking into this one, I think that both teams know how to get back into a game and know how to finish. So it's going to be purely skill-based in those lanes to see which team can get off to a good start.
Yeah, it's all going to be our early priority. We're talking about Scuttle Crabs, initial Drakes. That first Herald is often a very big pressure point as well.
Yeah, as for this game, we're going to need to be looking around that top side to see what happens to Camille. I imagine that hits the ban bench along with the Nidalee, but that's already 2 of your red side bans done. And when you're looking at that, there's champions like Udyr, champions like less so Olaf. They did get hit quite a lot on this patch with the Gore Drinker change, but more of these prevalent junglers that could just power farm the game. There's the Lilia that we saw last week. We know Careless can play that. Still an AP jungler that can be paired with the Renekton and likes of this. So it really does start to limit your pick ban on the red side when you're trying to think, okay, well, what can we really squeeze? What don't we want to play against? Because this champion is just too good if piloted well. And frankly, there's a lot of scary picks right now that junglers can just run through the entire league with.
Absolutely. And while we're talking about topside bans, we have to remember that Ernx has a very big pocket pick in the Gangplank. Extremely prolific GP player. So if they're not careful, he might just go, okay, I'll pull this out then.
Yeah, and with the aggressive picks on the other side, I think something that we do need to note is Galvanizer has, like you said, recently been picking up the Gnar, which has always been a champion that has been considered good into Gangplank. Obviously, pro play and common sentiment has not really supported that in recent time, with Gnar getting... Yeah, Gnar's been getting a lot of hate recently, and I think some of it's warranted, but the champion does still have uses if piloted well. We now have Stridebreaker as an item, which can lead to slightly better engages with a bit more consistency using the Mega Gnar. So I think it's a very different champion to the top bully we've seen for so long. Now it's almost like a worse Malphite who has lane pressure, but you really do need to know what you're doing, because if you don't know what it is, the champion really gets smashed by most matchups, as they, they're a squishy champion in the top lane. And if they don't know how to manage their Mega Bar, they can be really bullied by junglers who are proactive and wanting to focus that top side. And after last week of Careless's play, I would fancy a Fed Ernst for this game. I would like them ahead, regardless of what they're on.
Yeah, maybe. Just maybe. Looking elsewhere across the map, though, let's turn focus away from the top side for now. We talked about how the bot side for Careless was kind of punished quite hard by DMU in the game on stream last week. How do you think they match up, specifically just isolated in the bot lane, against BioChipmunk and Rob236?
I think putting them side by side, I have seen the name of BotKhan and BioChipmunk in just general UK play for a long time now. All the way back to when I was actually an okay League of Legends player. I can still remember facing off against these two respectively on multiple occasions, and I can tell you they're both the real deal. They know what they're doing, so I expect this to be a very much... It kind of sways based on what champions are picked. This could be a very respectful lane, where things like the Senna come out and you see quite a lot of passivity in the early game. But there also is the potential for more aggressive champions. We did see that was what happened last week with BotKhan and Deep 7 on the Senna Thresh lane. That was the main thing that got punished in the early game. That didn't mean that they particularly did a bad game. It's just the kind of thing of these are the lanes that you can punish early, because they lack a lot of the same brawling power as things like Draven is a champion I've seen a lot getting popped up right now. I don't think they're necessarily the best right now, but I have seen a lot of Draven players being quite happy with the current meta, at least itemization-wise. Not particularly sure why for that, but things like Lucian has seen themselves showing up in the bot lane more than ever for the best part of 4 seasons now. They've basically been residing to the mid lane, all but a World semi-final. So right now there are a lot more picks in that bottom lane that can work with these proactive supports, but it's really just about what your take is. If you want to go for the enchanters, passive, play the game slowly, great. You can go about that, and you can end the game with more of the team fight goals, like forcing people to come to objectives. Or you can take more aggressive champions that force an early lead, potentially can be used in these skirmishes, and then enable your team to play an open map, which gets your jungler a lot of prior. So right now, most styles are pretty doable. It's mainly just an execution basis and how the enemy can respond to them.
Yeah, much as we've seen in sort of very high tier player, we'll often see obviously a lot of those engage heavy supports, the Alistair, the Leona, now the Rel. That level of restriction isn't necessarily here. We sit a little further down. We ain't LAC here. There are plenty more viable options to go for.
Certainly so, and even looking at higher up levels of play, it's just about finding what your team can mesh with. We even saw, for example, I believe it was Astralis with Magi Felix's debut in the LEC this week. They performed pretty well on their Corki for one of those games, and this is just not a pick that you see very often, pretty much anywhere, frankly. So it's really just needless to show that you can pilot these picks if you are that good at them. It's more so just a thing of if your team can work well around them. And I think Senna is the pivotal example of this. As a bot laner, she has been played in so many different ways in just the short 2 years they've been out, where they have gone from a actual support to a basic ADC that goes for the lethality build and just all but ignores crit chance. They then pivoted back to now being a full crit long-range ADC. The more words that come out of my mouth, the more I realize how ridiculous Senna is as a champion. But point being, if you take a look at them, they have gone through so many iterations, and the current one is very oppressive if left unchecked. And so, since that was picked up by BotCon last week, I think it's likely going to be a contested pick, and it's going to be important to see what the other team answers to try and punish it, as we are finally in the Blessed Champion Select.
Talking. Don't even worry about it. So yes, into Champion Select, we will see how much of our conjecture actually makes it onto the field of battle. First ban comes out. No more Flash Bear Slap.
Yeah, this is the other jungler that we didn't really get to talk too much about, and that's mostly because both of these junglers haven't really got it too prevalently. It's not something that either of them really like to play, but it is still a pretty disgusting force in the jungle. And there's that Senna we are talking about, getting knocked off the table, just too abusive if you can't punish it early.
Definitely, yeah. And going from here, we might want to see a couple more ADC bans. It's hard to say specifically, of course, but...
Go on.
I was just wondering other things that could be banned. Obviously, the Kai'Sa we see a lot of bans of. That could potentially be taken out. Samira, that's another one.
There you go. That was the magic word. We're looking for Samira, we're looking at Kai'Sa, we're looking at Rel. These are the brand new champions, and I'm hoping I get to use the very fun and equally sad statistic, because we've already seen right now half of some of the more recent champions have been knocked off of the ban bench currently, Udyr being the primary exception. And I can't remember if it was last week or a previous one, but there was definitely a game where the 6 most recent champions all showed up in back-to-back games for pick ban. Obviously, yep. Kai'Sa and Senna have had a little bit more time, but it's not by much.
And as we said, the Nidalee is going to be taken away from Treleat there for the final Phase 1 ban. We also see that the Seraphine got banned away as well. First pick is going to be the Lilia, no big surprise there.
Yeah, and something that you were talking about with ADC bans is another very prominent one that doesn't see all too much attention, is that of the Misfortune. Now, the reason this champion is seeing a bit more play is post the Mythic reworks, they do have the option to go for crit builds or for the lethality, but they work very well with Lilia, same as Lucian, and the reason for this, and the reason we're likely to see a Lucian paired with the Lilia as the mid-jungle duo, is because of how Lilia's ult is coded. It means that these kind of dot effects, that is for some reason including the Misfortune and the Lucian ults respectively, do not make people end their sleep. So you can just get the sleep and fully rain down hell on someone. But actually we see the Gauntlet getting thrown down with a Camille Fiora insta-lock pairing in the top lane.
Yeah, I am very interested to see how the Fiora plays against this. Of course, the hookshot wall dive is so very telegraphed, so being there with the riposte sounds like a great counter.
Yeah, and when you have the Rel on Rob this week, something to look at is this champion is also very slow as far as it goes. We're hearing that they actually, the teams had an internal agreement to let Camille Fiora through and just take the skill matchup. So, you know, that's one way to throw down a gauntlet.
I mean, there you go, like, just on the honor system, I'm all about it.
Yeah, that's could have backfired quite badly if the Camille had been picked up first, but here is that Graves we're talking about. Now, we did mention how AP junglers are usually a nuisance for Graves. Now, since Lilia doesn't have the same level of potent assassination that Nidalee does, there is still the potential for Graves to actually just one-tap Lilia if they ever run into each other. And the way the jungle has been for a little while now, it's almost just been whoever runs into the other and has vision first will usually win. So right now, if Graves, level 3, encounters Lilia, it really just depends on if Lilia has finished taking a camp and has their bonus MS, or if Graves is just going to get a very calculated WQ into one-shot the Lilia in the jungle, as we see there's that MF band. Wrong side, though.
Nicely called, yes. We also see the Alistair taken away. It is a good pick into the rel, so nice thing to have taken off the board here.
Certainly, that is a champion that has been a real nuisance for her because they have the telegraphed very slow jump. I do like the Yuumi ban here, as every champion on Careless's side would be insane if they are just given a Yuumi to roam free. And something to point out, though, is there has been actually 0 mid-attention in the pick bans so far. Yeah. So, interestingly, you have the AD jungler on Sweet Summer Day and the AP for Trollope, so it's going to be assuming that we get inverted lane matchups, as a Kassadin is banned.
You had to go and say it, didn't you?
Yeah, that wasn't the attention I was expecting, and that indicates that something very passive that isn't going to do all too much in lane, like the Karma potentially might get locked in. This is a go-to when you want to pick an enchanter in the middle lane. Lulu is a bit less of a prominent one, but we'll have to see, as Rakan is not going to get picked up and paired with Xayah this game.
It's going to be picked up to go with that rel, and I still like that combo. Obviously, the amount of CC that rel brings to the table will allow the Blade Caller roots to come through quite often, and we will see the Victor picked up for Fallen Rain in the mid lane.
I am not liking these hovers on Deep for the support, and I am going to wait before I even acknowledge them. Buttercup is the person we were talking about earlier. That is still Botcan, just a different IGN for the day. So if we take a look at this bot lane matchup, as soon as they please stop hovering Twitch, please. Oh, thank you. Something normal. Yep. So this is a very safe bot lane. We talked about how Senna Thresh was quite safe and still got punished by a super aggressive lane. Ezreal Thresh is a whole degree higher, where an additional summon is pretty good.
Savior Arcane Shift.
Yeah, Arcane Shift is one hell of an ability. An extra flash from level 2 is well, that's gaming right there, as we see the Syndra is picked up last.
Okay, so the Syndra Victor matchup, how do you think that one will go?
Well, for the early levels, we're going to see that it's mainly just going to be trying to clear the wave. The gank setup comes online at level 3 for Ocean Croc once they can get that Q into stun. And there is very scary potential on Fallen Rain right now to get bursted out by this Grave Syndra. So it's going to be a Syndra-dictated lane, but once Victor gets his augment to upgrade the laser, they will be able to get push prio from that point from a very safe range.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, the mechanics for that. Do we think we're going to see KLF looking for early skirmishes to try and enable Fallen Rain to get that augment sooner? Because of course, turns out 25 stacks for every kill and assist picked up is nothing to sniff at.
Yeah, it is certainly one way to accelerate them being able to defend that, and as we do see here who will win the match, most people are favouring Careless right now. After last week's performance, I can understand why, but as far as it goes, it's going to be very dependent on, like we're talking about, the early potential aggression, and frankly, it's just going to be the coin flip in the top lane right now to see who gets off the ball. It's just a hard skill matchup. We know that Fiora has been typically favoured in this, like you talked about, the hook shot is very telegraphed, but innately, Fiora does not offer very much to a team fight, and even with the change of items in this season, they still haven't fared all too well. They're playable, they're good, but they are never going to be as good as Camille when it comes to just teamfight versatility, jumping on the Victor, jumping on the Lilia, holding them still. Even the Ezreal, Camille being one of the few people that can actually stop them from double flashing away from you.
Yeah, the Hextech Ultimatum is a heck of a thing. The thing that Fiora's always been really, really good at has been she's a very strong split pusher. Obviously, Camille is a very strong split pusher in her own right. Who do you think is... Do you have a preference in the terms of who is better on a side lane? Obviously, we said it was a skill matchup, so are they just going to be smashing heads for the entire game?
Well, there's no globals short of the Ezreal, and I highly doubt that's going to be super impactful for the side it is, mainly because if you had it the other way around, I could maybe see like super synergy where you try and coordinate a Camille ult into an Ezreal ult. But as it is, I really think this is just going to be 100% isolated. And at that point, then you have to look at the junglers, because it comes to who can give more attention to their top lane early, unless they've agreed to subtly just give them a 1v1 and neither lane interact there. But on the more likely and hopeful answer, it's going to be about who can impact there first.
Well, I mean, both junglers obviously have very strong early clears, so we may see an early fight either over the first topside Scuttle or Sweet Summer Day or Treleep, trying to make some early pressure, try and force a summoner to give either Unks or Galvanizer the advantage in that matchup.
Only thing is, like you say, it's very fast clears from both. Lilia is favoured for the speed of their clear, especially since, because they're on blue side, Lilia can start red buff, clear their camps up to top lane, and path up there quite nicely. Graves can do the same, but it means they won't be doing the red buff first, won't have as fast of a clear. Generally speaking, though, Graves will have a far healthier clear, and the only real thing that will indicate how scary it's going to be for Treleep is if they take that Gromp at the end. Because if you path to the top side, or in this case, wherever your blue buff is, you can hit that Gromp now and heal up to basically 70% HP if you combo Smite by the end of it. So it's going to be very dependent for me to see if they try and force a level 3 gank, or if they like to play it a bit slower, let the Lilia have a more passive early, and really just leave it to the responsibility of Fiora to dodge out on the early Graves ganks.
Alright, as we are now in the section between Champ Select and the game, I am obliged to shout out our sponsors for this stream, Unite Students, Logitech G, and Twitch Student. Thank you so much for the support. Links are, I believe, below the stream if you wish to check them out.
Yeah, always grateful for the constant support, especially allowing us to bring this show to you every Wednesday. Can't wait to see how the season develops right now, as the second week is usually when people start to show their true colours. So it's time to find out if Careless can keep it rolling, or if Robin's Cringe has just had a rough first game.
Absolutely, yeah, and don't know about you, I mean, everyone at home seems to be... I want to say, actually, we saw there was a 65-35 split on the vote. Considering, obviously, similar scorelines for the teams, but the more difficult path taken by Careless, I was actually expecting it to be slightly more favoured. So, unless there are just a whole bunch of Robin's Cringes fans in the chat, discounting bias, I was actually expecting there to be a bigger difference. So, we'll have to see.
Certainly so, and you can imagine it after the performance against DMUT1 last week of Careless really did earn their place at the top right now. They are happily sitting there 3-0 as we make our way into game. Now let's take a look at the level 1.
Absolutely, so here we are. Welcome to Summoner's Rift. So far, it looks fairly standard. Lines of scrimmage just being set up as would be right and proper. Yes, there we go. Unks and Treleep are sitting together, maybe try and bait some Sweet Summer Day into some kind of fight, but it looks like he'll be having none of that.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see if Treleep goes for the level 1 invade onto those raptors. This ward that they've placed, though, indicates otherwise, as when you are jungling, you usually want to put your level 1 ward on the opposite side of the map to where you're starting, so that way you get extra knowledge and know if the enemy jungler is invading you level 2, so that way you can then counter-invade and split the map. Only thing to note, though, is this is a Graves, and they've actually put their ward down in the pixel bush in the river. Now, if Sweet Summer Day really wanted to, which it looks like they're not going to, you can actually just jump over that wall and completely subvert that ward, which absolutely ruins the enemy's plan. But, as we see, both junglers starting bot side as predicted, likely both receiving decent leashes, so going to be basically even information. Both laners should be able to let their jungler know that, yeah, they start bot side, so it's going to be what we expected.
Yeah, and of course the information will be there as well as soon as Careless spot that their opposing bot lane make it 2 lane around the same time.
So as we come into it, why don't you pick a lane and we'll try and break down that one.
Well, we've already spoken about top to a great degree, and of course we've spoken about all three lanes, but I think as we stand, bot lane looks like, obviously, no early jungle pressure, so it's very much going to come down to strictly who can play this 2v2 better. How do you think this matchup actually plays out? Obviously, Ezreal Thresh, very safe, but I'd like to say that Relzaya does have plenty of tools to punish that in the early game.
And as we see attempting to use those tools, only thing is, as we see actually a flash.
There is the flash, yep. Unfortunately, when you use that crash down, you do sacrifice a great portion of the movement speed, and unfortunately the attract repel was not able to be brought through.
And what they didn't give me time to say is the thing is, the reason Alistair is so good in Durell is because you can use the headbutt to stop them getting that initial crash down. Thresh can flay them. It's a bit harder to react to, so but it's a very similar principle, where we can see if Deep Deep is playing their mind out, they can pretty much negate Rob's engages every time they go for this crash down.
Definitely, yeah, and what I was going to point out, we did see on stream, is that Unks had the early push in top lane, and has come in and placed a ward on that red buff, so they now know Sweet Summer Day has finished his top side, and more importantly that he is not going towards the Krugs and is immediately instead going towards the mid lane. In fact, Fallen Rain is going to have to flash out here, I'm pretty sure. There it is, the flash over the wall. Sweet Summer Day will not pursue and will just head to take the bottom crab. Just a simple handshake as Treleep will pick up the top one.
Yeah, and as we saw, Lilia went for that Grump, which means, like we see now, 100% HP. So Sweet Summer Day, after not seeing an early force into the top lane, clicks that that's going to happen, decides, okay, going to path through mid, try this gank. Very flexible route. It does, however, mean that Tribe will be able to invade this Raptor camp. As we see, there's definitely a skirmish happening top, but it is, despite HP values, going to be happily in the favor of Unks.
Yeah, right now, the early game poke from Fiora can be rather frustrating. Obviously, the Vitals doing true damage and being so easy to proc if the zone is on the right point of your opponent. So as we see right now, Unks just going to hard shove Galvanizer in right now, even force him to take it early back. I will expect, there it is, the teleport back to lane. Just picked him an extra Dorans for some extra sustain in this early lane state.
Now the only thing is the Doran's passives are now unique. So that 3% Omnivamp that the Doran's Blade is offering is actually not doing anything for the second one. It is just space stats. Whether Galvanizer was conscious of that when they bought it is one thing, but it does mean that they're going to have a bit less sustain than they would be used to from last season. They do have the wave pushed in. They need to crash it right now, because if Unks can freeze under tower, it's going to be very oppressive for Camille to do anything, because you can't ever hookshot to try and force them back, because it will get parried and then you get traded on. But they do manage to get the wave to crash. They needed this. It's good by Galvanizer. They're going to get the wave to bounce. But, thing to note, TP in Fiora's advantage right now. We'll have to see if they just use that to come back the lane. Probably will, based on what we're seeing.
We tend to see in the current meta that teleports are generally burned, I don't want to say selfishly, but early skirmishes outside of certain teams, cough G2, generally, yeah, early teleports are just used to try and get as much early farm as possible to really get up towards the first big power spikes with those mythic items.
And what we're going to point out just quickly is that is a tier on Fiora to pair with the Sheen. So expect the poke to come out from this Fiora quite frequently, as this is the problem for Galvanizer when they don't have lane control, is when you're in a Grasp versus Grasp lane matchup, if the enemy has wave control, they will always trade onto you with Grasp, and you won't have yours ready. And that makes it very oppressive to play against. Basically, Fiora is now poking them out as this domination happens in top, but in response, the Cringes are going to get themselves the first Infernal Dragon.
Yeah, great response coming out there. Treleep is once again taking away the Krub camp. They could potentially set up an early dive here. I don't think they will. Actually, both Unks and Treleep are level 6 here. Galvanizer needs to be mindful of this right now. Trying to get in. It does not look like they will pull the trigger, but they will claim that first singular tower plate. And KLS are already sat at an over 1k gold advantage at 6 minutes.
Yeah, and that is almost certainly just on the back of Fiora. Bot lane, a 10 CS lead in the Ezreal's favor, but frankly, just looking at it right now, this is just lane diff coming out. So we're going to need to see what happens with these items, as Ernx has all but secured top priority for the rest of the game, if they so want it. This is what we talked about, where they were just allowed to have this isolated 1v1. And the thing is, the junglers really haven't done much elsewhere. Dryup has managed to invade both of those Krug camps, which has been really big. But Sweet Summer Day responding with the Dragon has meant that the team will have the slightest bit of a pickup on the side. And really, it's the mid and bot for Robin's Cringes that need to be doing things a bit more proactively. We need to be seeing plays with this Rel, as when it gets later on, they definitely lose a lot of their tanky potency.
Yeah, and of course, with Herald coming up shortly, Ernx having Prio in this top lane will be very important, as it will allow Careless to more easily access that play. DP7 does land hook onto Rob here, gets the catch back in. Here comes the Drowsy, 2 hits coming through. Ernx goes incredibly... No, Traleep goes incredibly low, rather. First Blood will, however, would be picked up, traded back by Ocean Rock. Rogue dodges away from the death sentence, and that will be a 1-for-1.
And just a forced play from Deep there on the Thresh. Rob felt like they were the one doing the baiting there, but it turned out very much that as soon as the sleep came in, great ult from Buttercup on this Ezreal, manages to clip Graves as they're actually trying to flash away, drops them just low enough that post-sleep they're managing to get the kill, as we are going to head into a temporary pause.
Alright, well, we'll hopefully get word from the from production about the reason for that for you, but let's talk about the game state as it stands right now then. Slight advantage for Careless, 1-1, Dragon already been taken, but definitely big prio for Careless to take the first Herald.
Yeah, it is very much in their favour, especially with that being the jungler traded there. We might see Careless just pivot straight over there, potentially see if the Lilia wants to invade off of that. And since you have your support now in the position that they finished off there, we can actually see the Careless support roam straight into mid. They're going to be able to force the push in the middle lane and zone the Syndra off of a lot of CS, which really does reduce their effectiveness, because we were talking about beforehand how Syndra kind of needs to be the bully in this lane. They need to be getting ahead before Victor can just wave clear with E and never have to interact with you again. And frankly, if you're losing out on one of those biggest points of prominence where you were just tipping over to the level 6 and gaining kill pressure because your jungler died, well, really does negate a lot of the Syndra's effectiveness, at very least until they start getting over to 2-1-2 items.
Yeah, the first big spike obviously being that mythic completion, but yes, 2 items is absolutely when you're suddenly going, oh wait, where did my ADC go?
Yeah. And there's a lot of squishy champions that can be susceptible to that. I say a lot. Basically everybody's short of Rel, and if you catch the Rel when they are not in their, well, dismounted form, I suppose is the way to say it, or when Aftershock is not procced, you can still one-tap them as like champions like that. Obviously, it's the other team. I had that backwards right then, getting a bit loopy. But point being, we've heard that there's a little bit of lag happening for Trilipe on that Lilia. So we're just going to be waiting for them to hopefully get all sorted so we can get back into game.
Right, fantastic. I know I called them out already, but this seems like as good an opportunity as ever to thank once again our sponsors, Twitch Student, Logitech G, and Unite Students. Links below the stream if you want to check those out. Thank you once again.
Yeah, certainly, and just to again reference back to before the game, thing to point out is as we're looking forward into this one, I think it's going to very much be opposite sides of the map doing the main forcing, as we've seen a lot of the success from the Careless squad has just been Fiora hard winning this 1v1. They could have been punished really badly on their level 3 wave when they pushed it in, like you said, to get that ward onto the Graves' red buff. And obviously doing that gives over a lot of information to your jungler, let them know that they were going to path down into mid, still ended up losing the flash on the Victor. But if Graves actually paths up to top lane there, because of where the wave was, they can try and chunk out the Fiora, and if they do so, you can actually see Camille just freeze the wave in front of tower, and then this would be a very different lane. But since that didn't happen, and the Fiora got to just exist in isolation, well, we can see they've done very good things with it.
Absolutely, yeah. Ernx doing great work on the Fiora so far. We will have to look and see how that lane dominance converts into the later stages of the game. Obviously, for now, the only solid advantage we can speak of is in that top lane. Across the rest of the map, it's pretty even. So how best do you think they can leverage that top lane, apart from obviously getting the Herald, as I mentioned earlier?
Yeah, the Herald is going to be an important swing when you have a hard split pusher like Fiora, who can't offer the same things to team fights as a Camille can, where you want to be able to have that pressure to knock down tier 2 towers very early, because then they can start to get you to the point where it's, okay, well, the enemy's looking at Baron with their other 4 members, and Fiora's threatening onto our bot lane inhib tower. At that point, it starts to become just wary enough that if everything goes wrong, they could just end the game off of a single push. So I would really like to see them take that Rift Herald and try and use it on whichever side the map the opposite side of the map they want to play around. So if they want to go for a dragon victory, I actually can't recall. It was Infernal Dragon has already been slain, but I can't remember which other dragon was currently up. Mountain was the other one that's been taken.
Mountain's coming up, yeah.
Okay. So it looks like while we're waiting for this pause to happen, I think we're going to throw to a break for the very moment, just while we let the players sort out their lag for the very moment.
Right, and we're back. That was a shorter break than I was expecting, but gets us right back into the action, Melvin Izzle.
Yeah, absolutely debated. 10-minute pause displayed, only one used. We've got all of it saved up for next time. So as we can see, hopping straight back into it, like you're talking about in our little break there, even mid, even bot with regards to CS. Obviously, Syndra does have the kill in their pocket, but it's right now a play happening on the top. The Rel is here, but Fiora is Fiora with parry up.
Yeah, there's no way should fall for this, and of course, very worst case, there is a flash available. This does mean that BioChipmunk is kind of being left out to dry here, and being forced to just defend under the tower on their own. But obviously, with the Feather Storm available, they can play it pretty safe, and with Rob being here in the top lane, that pressure that Unks had towards the Herald has been removed, and as we see, Robin's Cringe is going to go for taking that objective.
Yeah, a nice proactive rotation does actually get them priority on this objective as they're forcing
big pressure going in. Traleep gets caught and absolutely decimated. There's a true shot barrage coming through, but it kind of flies by and waving on the way. The Herald will be picked up by Robin's Cringes. So a second kill picked up and a lot of potential gold available. That's where the pause came in previously, and we will have another one. Is that a Traleep issue again, perhaps? Okay, so since it seems as though Traleep's latency issues have not yet been fixed, we're going to jump to another break. You said we had 9 minutes. We've got that time banked up, folks, so hopefully it won't take too long to get back into game, and hopefully the issues will be fully resolved then. We will take a quick break. We'll be right back with Careless versus Robin's Cringes.